All right, so I'm going to kick us over to Shams, the homeless hero, to welcome everybody to this event.
I didn't have time to write anything. Because I'm out there and I'm giving out flyers. I'm talking to directly impacted people and making sure that people are aware of what's going on. So forgive me if I'm just not, precise. But hey, if I'm politically incorrect, I'm not a politician, so y'all can forgive me. And as City and State said, I'm a straight shooter. So let's just go with that. All right. And this is something that's different from what you probably normally do. This is something where we're talking to directly impacted people like myself in a mayoral candidate forum. In my lifetime, I'm 51, I've never seen anything like it. And I don't know about you, but to me, this is something that is the first of its kind event. And let me just start by saying this. For the mayoral candidates that are here, I want to start by saying to you that I am totally grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule, especially running a campaign, and to dignify those of us who are directly impacted by homelessness, by being present to listen to us, to hear our questions, to make us a part of the conversation. Today, you're not talking over us. You're not talking about us. You're talking with us. Never in my history, I don't think ever in our history, has that happened for any campaign, particularly when it deals with the issue of homelessness. I've struggled with homelessness since the age of 10. I'm a product of the foster care system since the age of 2. I've been a ward of the state for most of my life. When I speak, and I speak as a directly impacted person, I know what I'm talking about. If I tell you that the system is broken, the system is messed up, and you look deep into my history and you see all that I've been through, I mean, everything ain't gloom and doom. But when I talk, I know what I'm talking about. And when I'm telling you right now that things need to be changed, and it needs to be changed for the better, I'm telling you what I know. So I don't take it lightly that you have given us this moment, which is not going to be just a moment, but you've taken this time to say, you matter. Your voice matters. Your vote counts. That says something so powerful. You look at New York, and New York, I believe, is the heartbeat of the nation. Everybody is looking at New York City. They are studying us right now. Homelessness is a crisis affecting the whole country. And the country is looking at New York to see how are we going to solve this. Those of you who are running, I see you, Corinne. Those of you who are running, whoever makes it into that office, you're going to determine how the rest of the world deals with homelessness. You can't take that lightly. You can't take it lightly. So I'm sorry I didn't write anything, but I'm gonna just kind of end this by saying this. And I didn't even get to go through all the questions. So I don't even know what's being asked. But I want to say this. If I could ask something of you, it's going to be this. Tonight, don't give us the political spill. You're talking to directly impacted people. You're talking to real people. Don't give us the campaign stuff. I'm telling you, I'm in the streets. That's why I don't have nothing prepared. I'm talking to people. Not just saying what I think. And I'm not just talking to homeless people. I'm talking to people that's looking for a better quality of life. I'm talking to everybody. And I can tell you one thing. People are looking for detailed answers. People are looking for...
The folks from the Islamic Cultural Center didn't want press to be
We
there,
got somebody
so
not muted, but
press schedule.
Shams, thank you so much. Shams, you got Kate, they accidentally muted you too. But so I just want to explain the format really fast. So we're going to play video questions, and then all the candidates are going to have 90 seconds to answer. So if we can go ahead and get the first three candidates on screen, and Shams is going to introduce them.
I was cut off, so I don't know what's going on. I got to pull up my other computer.
That was because Sean's mic wasn't muted. But we're all here now. So do you want me to go ahead and do the intro for the first three?
Don't do that. I'm just messing around. Yo, you see that? No, they bring in the lunch, the dinner. So where we at?
So we've got Catherine Garcia, Lori Sutton, and Maya Wiley.
Okay. So let's do this. For our first group, y'all caught that. We want commitments, right? Y'all all caught that, right? Okay. For our first group, we have Catherine Garcia, we have Lori Sutton, and we have Maya Wiley. Unfortunately, Andrew Yang is down with COVID. And, you know, as a person who was victimized by COVID, I wish him all the best into a speedy recovery. I know he wanted to be here. And, you know, that's how that COVID works. So we all wish him the best. We'll be starting alphabetically and rotating who starts each question, beginning with Catherine.
All right, so let's roll that first tape.
Hello, candidates. My name is Fannie Lou Diane, and I became homeless after I was illegally evicted from my apartment after my landlord refused to remediate toxic black mold according to the guidelines set by New York State. My first question is, can you tell us in your own words the connection between systematic racism and the current housing and homelessness? What have you done in your career that addresses these inequalities? And what is your plan of action if you become mayor?
So that goes to Catherine first. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you so much for that question. And, you know, I've spent much of my life in public service, and I have to say, when I am talking to people who are experiencing homelessness or going through the foster system, it's there, but for the grace of God, go I. You know, I was adopted. I could have ended up very easily in the foster system, confronted with all of those challenges. And so I am always eternally grateful that there were little angels along that pathway that it made sure that I did not end up without the support that I needed. And I've really worked to serve everyone in the city of New York, whether or not that was through the water supply or doing sanitation, but also promoting people and ensuring that I promoted the first deputy commissioner who was Latino. I promoted the first woman 4-star in the agency. I worked to ensure that there were more opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses at the agency.
Okay, you only got about 30 seconds left, so we want to make sure homelessness and systemic racism, that connection.
And so, you know, my job has been really much more focused on ensuring that everyone had services. And I worked on housing issues back long time ago when I was at the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which was about finding permanent housing for people who are experiencing homelessness.
Thank you so much. We're going to now go over to Lori.
Well, thank you so much, Corinne and Shams. So nice to see you, and thank you so much for this question. You know, for nearly 30 years, I had the privilege of serving in the United States Army. And in that capacity as a doc, as a psychiatrist, as a commander, I realized early on that the military was the only place in our society where a young Black male had an equal chance as his white male counterpart of reaching the age of 30. And what I saw during those 30 years, and what I worked tirelessly as a physician, as a combat veteran, as a hospital commander, as an innovator, was to make sure that all of my soldiers had the means, had the opportunity to succeed. We were building teams. And, you know, people don't realize this, but the United States Army is the most diverse institution on earth. Race, creed, color, religion, every state, every territory, countries where soldiers come in.
Okay, wrap it up and make sure you get to homelessness.
And homelessness. So when I had the privilege of coming to New York City, we applied those principles and we achieved a nearly 90% reduction in veteran homelessness. The innovations that we used to achieve that outsized impact, as mayor, I'll put them to work and even more, because what this pandemic has shown us is that we can no longer just not have difficult conversations. We must act, we must commit, and homelessness is the very foundation of what it means to live a full life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're going to go over to Maya. So the question was about the connection between homelessness and systemic racism.
Yeah, so let me start with, I lived in a Black neighborhood when I was a little girl, and my best friend, Charlene, was my best friend in our overcrowded, segregated, underfunded public school, was also lived around the corner, and her mother was a grocery store cashier at the neighborhood grocery. And one day I could not find Charlene. And the reason is because despite the long hours her mother worked, when the rent got raised, she couldn't pay it. And they disappeared from my life. And I don't know where they went. And it is very likely that they could have become homeless, because as we know, that homelessness is an eviction crisis. An eviction crisis is an affordability crisis. An affordability crisis is also a jobs without justice crisis. And that's what systemic racism is. It is the intersection, the connection between the ways in which we have made it too hard to get a job if you're Black or Latino, an immigrant from another country, the way in which we have made the work not pay, benefits not sufficient or non-existent, and then it translates into housing we can't afford. And then when we need services, trauma-informed care, we don't provide it. And that's why we have a homeless problem, and we can fix it and solve it. And I've spent 30 years of my life as a civil rights attorney, and I founded an organization called the Center for Social Inclusion, where the mission was to transform it.
Thank you. Shams, do you have any follow-ups?
Yeah. I'd like to ask, as mayor, you know, and from my experience being homeless and dealing with the system and stuff like that, I realized that there are connections to the systemic way things are done that negatively affect Black and brown populations, from education, et cetera, that can lead to homelessness. I would like to know, as mayor, what specifically would you do to change the way the system is run in order to end that systemic racism that negatively.
Whoever wants to can jump in.
So I will say that, like, when I'm mayor, that the one commitment I make to you is that we break the pipeline to homelessness and we break the pipeline to prison. And that's about investment in our youngest people, that making sure that you had the support when you were a kid would have had a totally different trajectory. going forward. But we also need to break this concept that we don't have enough money to house people. We can increase the rent subsidy and make it so that there's a permanent home rather than having a shelter plan. We need to have a permanent home plan because housing heals. It
Maya,
makes
did you want
so
to
that
jump
you
on that?
can hold a job. It makes it so you can do education, and it makes it so that you are healthier overall.
Yeah, so absolutely, we, instead of spending $3 billion a year on homeless shelters, we should be investing in folks having housing first, having supportive housing. We should be taking the 100 hotels that have been shuttered and turn them into affordable and permanently affordable housing for our folks who need it. But I'm going to go one step further, because when you talk about systems, you have to talk about all the problems, right? So we have New Deal New York, where we're going to spend $10 billion in capital construction solving problems. We're going to create 100,000 jobs and have local targeting for hiring. We're going to actually support with the money that the city spends on workforce development to ensure that we're helping folks get jobs that help them also pay for housing. But we're also going to use that capital construction money to make sure that what we're building and what we're doing is solving community problems in communities of color who frankly had these problems before COVID struck. COVID made deeper, more serious, and those are our commitments. One more thing, Participatory Justice Fund, $18 million in communities that have high rates of gun violence, so communities can say what they want to do with the money. We want to put the power with the people.
Thanks, Lori. I'm going to let you get in really fast.
Sure. Listen, Shams, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn. I'm going to help. And you, as you've said, you have this lived experience. Yes, all of the systems that have existed for so many decades, we're going to tear down the barriers, and together we will move forward for a better future for every New Yorker. And you're going to be leading the way.
So that's a great transition to our next question. So from all of our questions were provided by directly impacted New Yorkers who are either currently or previously homeless. So let's roll that second question.
I've been living in a shelter system for the past 5 years. I'm undocumented. I would like to know what can you do for us?
Okay, so sorry, that was a little hard to hear for me. I don't know if it was hard to hear for anyone else. So the question was, my name is Carlene. I've been living in the shelter system for 5 years and I'm undocumented. The voucher program does not apply to me. I want to know what you are going to do for us. That's to Lori first.
Absolutely. Great question, Carlene. Let me say this. New York City, our city could not function without all of us. And that includes our undocumented brothers and sisters, moms and dads, kids in our school system, and yes, in our shelters. We must safeguard and protect all New Yorkers, especially our undocumented, who are greatest risk for being left aside. And Carlene, I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to learn. I'm going to listen. And together we will forge a pathway ahead while also advocating for federal comprehensive immigration reform so that you're never in this position to begin with.
Yeah, thanks so much. Over to Maya.
So I'm going to listen, learn, and lead. And the way I'm going to lead is by making sure that our programs are oriented for every resident. So if our subsidy structure can't be used for residents who are undocumented, we will find our city resources that we can deploy that way. And let me just add one other thing. Uninsurance, right? 600,000 New Yorkers in this city do not have health insurance. That is part of systemic racism in terms of who doesn't get the benefit. And so a lot of those folks are undocumented, and we are working right now on a plan where we're going to use the power of the city and the purse and bargaining, and we are going to create and build upon more insurance for folks, including those who are undocumented.
Thanks so much. Over to Catherine.
Thank you so much for that question. It really is great to hear the lived experience for people, but this is also so short-sighted. If we use city dollars, which do not have constraints, we could get her a permanent apartment. You know, that would be a permanent solution for her and her family. and it would be less expensive for the city, and it allow them to grow and to change and to be able to fully partake of the city system. We need to make really smarter decisions about how we use money and how we take care of the people in our city. Immigrants, I would say, have saved this city over and over again, reviving it, coming in, being our entrepreneurs, being the people who bring us a whole different cultural experience. So my commitment is that I would use city funds to ensure that we had rent subsidy for people in shelter. We can pay it in the shelter, we can pay you to get an apartment. I want to make sure you have a permanent home.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to just poll everybody else on screen right now. Do you all agree that rent subsidies and voucher programs should apply to people who are undocumented? Is that something everyone's going to commit to here?
Yes.
That's great, because Carlene's experience is being in the shelter for 5 years. In your administration, how many months should people spend in a shelter before going to permanent housing? Let's start with Catherine, then Lori, then Maya. Just quick answer.
It should absolutely be almost zero time unless they need other supports in order to make that transition successful.
When we started our program with ending veteran homelessness, it was over 600 days from the time someone got to the shelter to permanent housing. We were able to bring that down to under 89 days. That's still too long, but we will absolutely move heaven and earth to get folks to permanent housing.
Maya?
0. Housing first. Everybody's housing ready. 0.
Well, I'm going to want to know later how you're going to make that happen. But Shams, do you have some more follow-ups?
Yeah. Well, you answered the question about the amount of times, and we need to we really need to reduce that time frame. Most of the people that are in the shelter system are here for a year, 2 years, and if you're undocumented, every undocumented person that I've come across have been languishing in the shelter system for more than 4 and 5 years, and that's horrific at a cost of $3,500 plus per month. That's horrific. What I want to follow up with is, this may be a little off, but I want to talk about the percent of AMI. Will you prioritize for new housing units? We have an experience where, we have a lot of buildings going up in communities. A lot of them are known as affordable housing, but we know that the AMI actually affects, what it costs to get in there. And then we're going to get into the lottery system later. But what would you do? At what percent of AMI will you prioritize for new housing units?
I would prioritize less than 50% AMI going forward. And those
Lori?
would be the units I've built.
I would agree with that. And I would couple that with the vocational and jobs training to get the skills to be able to get higher up on that AMI scale.
And Maya?
I'm going to demand more. We have to have enough housing for folks who are very low and extremely low income. So we got to have bans for all the levels who need it. And that's going to be a comprehensive housing strategy that it includes what we're getting from private developers, but also more partnerships for not-for-profit developers, the way we leverage our vacant space, and the way we use our resources to buy up what's available. So we're creating permanently affordable housing for those who need it most. And that includes $2 billion in our New Deal New York plan for NYCHA.
But Maya, sorry, at what AMI percent would you do that?
But this is my point. Because I am going to push back on you, Shams, because we're being too limited if that's the only question we're asking. Because the reality is this city has never had a comprehensive housing approach where we're not only focused on AMI. So we got to look at all the bands. We have underperformed and not created enough housing for folks who are at very low and extremely low income. We have 5,000 vacant apartments generally every year in NYCHA, 5,000. And we have these vacant properties. And so it's not just about relying on what we can do with AMI and private developers, although yes, we have to create many more bands. They're at 30% of AMI, not just 50%.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go to our next question because it was a little hard to hear. We're going to try muting everybody when we play it. And so you'll have to unmute when we come back and start asking you questions. Okay. So we're just going to try to go a little slower in transitioning over and hope you can hear that next question.
And I have a question for the mayoral candidates regarding DHS cleanup sweeps, which are in direct violation to CDC guidance on not spreading COVID, and which terrorize those on the streets and makes New York City lose funding through undercount. Will you end this practice and the waste of money and the human terror caused by this practice?
So the question was street sweeps, and we're going to start with Maya. And the points made are that when you do street sweeps moving unsheltered people, you lose funding because you can't count those people because you moved them. Furthermore, that's in violation of CDC guidelines to allow people to shelter in place unless you can offer them single hotel rooms. And the question is, in your administration, will you end the practice of street sweeps? To Maya first, you have 90 seconds.
You got to unmute.
Sorry, yes. And we're going to do it by partnering also with the not-for-profit providers who are highly skilled at helping to help people who are homeless, who may have mental health challenges, may have addiction challenges, may have both, so that we're getting them into housing. And so one of the things I've heard from experts is that that is something that the city did not do sufficiently. And we're going to correct that. And I am talking about a housing first strategy to do it, but sweeps, absolutely not.
Great. That's going to go over to Catherine.
We need to make sure that we are reaching out to anyone who is living on the street so that we are getting them in to either supportive housing or regular housing, whatever it is that they need, because sleeping out on the street shouldn't be an option in a city this wealthy. We need to make sure that we are focused on ensuring that they have a place to go. And I know that that can take a long time. And I would believe in doing drop-in centers so that we can begin to make the contact. Do you need a place to do your laundry? Do you need to take a shower? Do you want to watch a movie? I mean, obviously not in COVID times, but
or watch this panel. We had a lot of people who were unsheltered contact us and say that they were having trouble finding a place to watch this. So exactly what you're saying, access to Wi-Fi for people who are unsheltered and access to basic things like watching a movie is very important.
It's very important. And I feel like it gives us the opportunity to create trust so that people will come in and take the services that are offered, that they will come in and take the opportunity for a permanent home. Because I know that sometimes is really challenging. And so that my focus would be on how do we create those trust bonds?
Let's say your offer right now, given the current shelter system, is the congregate shelter. And somebody says, no, I don't feel safe there. Catherine, what would you do?
So I believe that we need to be moving people directly into either safe haven beds or into supportive housing beds, and that they have the services that they need in order to be successful, to deal with any issues they might have, to be able to think about getting a job again, to connect to employment services. All of those things need to, they're the right long-term thing to do.
All right, over to Lori. Thank you.
I think it's so important, particularly for those, and the word that really stands out from this question is terror. No one should be feeling terror at the hands of their city government. And I think that one of the things we've got to do, we have this investment in shelters. We have to make them safer. We have to make them more welcoming. And a city employee is going to have a hard time making that point, but working with the not-for-profits and peer individuals who can be, that lived experience and help develop the relationships, those bonds of trust, while we're also developing our capacity for permanent housing. But I really think that given the experiences I've heard so many individuals on the street relay, I wouldn't want to go to shelter either if I had my stuff stolen, if I was, sexually assaulted, whatever the case may be. We need to fix that. At the same time, we're working for permanent housing solutions, but it's all about relationships and safety.
Shams, any follow-ups on that?
Yes, indeed. So would you agree to dismantle the diversion unit and replace that with a unit or a group of a group that can that are trained to deal with people that are homeless, that are some that may be suffering from substance use disorder or mental illness or disabilities, any other disabilities? Would you commit to just dismantling, having police interact in that regard?
Is this a question for me?
And you can start.
Oh, okay,
And
great. Listen, I think it's a both and approach here. The diversion, I'm very interested watching the diversion demonstration projects that are ongoing right now that are keeping individuals who've got mental illness from going to the prison system and wrapping around the services that you mentioned. But I also know that we're terribly short on supportive housing. And we know that individuals who have tremendous mental health or other needs and different abilities that can do so well with supportive housing. The research shows that it's the way to provide dignity, respect, honor, and again, safety. That's what I would emphasize.
But would you end police participation in street outreach?
No, I would not. I would team up police with peer-to-peer counselors.
Okay, I'd love to hear what Maya has to say on that. Why don't you jump in?
Absolutely not. It's gone. It's over. 40% of Rikers are folks with mental illness. We're not going to house folks who have mental health issues, who need mental health supports that way. And diversion, frankly, the police are not trained appropriately for it, and we shouldn't put resources into training them that way. We should focus policing on appropriate things for policing. We need to have a cahoots model. We need to have something that's from Oregon. That's literally a program where there's a crisis intervention team that are both trained professionals. And I've also been talking to experts who are asking for peers, and peers who are often so effective at helping folks because they've had the experiences themselves. That's the way to go. And we're also going to work on more mental health services. And that's part of dealing with the lack of insurance and programs so that folks also have more supports at the front end, not just at the back end.
Catherine, do you have anything to follow up?
Certainly. So I agree with Maya and with Lori to a certain extent. I believe it's more and more, and having different things that work across the city are important. So the first level needs to be having the outreach that's appropriate. Having outreach that is about the crisis management, about the mental health, about.
But just for clarity, would that include police outreach?
And so, but I would not discount having police outreach as well.
So Lori and Catherine are saying police will continue to participate in outreach to people who are unsheltered, and Maya is saying that she would end that practice. Just for clarity, I want to make sure I've got you right.
Police in partnership with peers and trained mental health professionals. That's the best practice across the country right now. We need to bring it to New York.
There's a very big difference. I just want to make a clarification between police available for backup if there's a situation that requires policing versus police as part of the front end, front facing, and specifically focused on the diversion.
I really disagree on that point. I would organize it so that they are trained as part of a team. I don't know of a single social worker who wants to go out on a call that may turn volatile and deadly in a moment.
In the cahoots model, they are not the front end, they stand back. But here's my point. We actually don't invest appropriately in what is crisis intervention, and we have the opportunity to do it differently. And the fact that there is so much fear is about how we pull together our resources to ensure that we're doing it appropriately. But the other thing we have to do, and that's why I'm talking about the lack of insurance, is we have to ensure that folks aren't ending up on the street in the first place because they're getting the supportive services before they end up homeless. And a big part of what we have to recognize is not just waiting for folks to end up on the street, it's making sure that they've got the supportive services so that they don't. And that's a big part of what we will do.
James, looks like you want to jump in. Go ahead.
I got to say one thing. I appreciate all of your comments. Trust me. Because I'm a victim of the diversion unit. And the problem I had with it is that where they were telling me they were going to help me and I submitted to the help, I ended up in handcuffs. And I said, wait, what is this? They said, we're not arresting you, but you're putting me in handcuffs. They brought me to a police station, made me take off my sneakers and threw me into a cell, and then threatened to give me a ticket unless I entered the shelter system. And because of the fear of ending up with a warrant, I stayed in the shelter system. But the trauma from that experience, I mean, I don't want to speak to it right now, but when the individual says terror, this is the foundation of me entering the shelter system. And all I did was ask for help.
Right.
This can't
I
happen.
wonder if Catherine and Lori, are you hearing that about how different it feels for different people, you know, for a Black man to be confronted by police, you know, for doing nothing more than seeking a warm place to sleep?
Absolutely.
And that is not what I would envision. And I completely am hearing your experience. And that can't be the way that we are approaching this. If you are asking for help, help has to be the thing. I have seen when, you know, homeless outreach folks have gone out with PD, homeless outreach folks have ensured that the person who is experiencing homeless and who's asking for help gets the services they need. That has to be the model, not that you are going to a cell. And certainly we don't want to, we certainly don't want to put people on Rikers because they're homeless. We don't want to criminalize being homeless.
Lori,
That's
before
what
we
we
move
do.
on, will you listen to the experience of directly impacted people and respond to their experience of it, not the intention of the people doing it?
Oh, of course. And Shams, what you described there is the exact opposite of what we need to establish as a humane and compassionate process that leads to the right place. So,
Right. So
thank you.
before we wrap this section up, because we started a little late, we're going to run a little long. And I want to ask, because we thought it might come up earlier, but it didn't, what you all think about the congregate shelter system and what that will look like under your administration. So that's going to be our last question. So we'll start with Lori on this one.
Yeah, I think that with crisis comes opportunity. And so coming out of this crisis, yes, there's a lot we can do to make the congregate shelter system better. I think that has to lead with the lived experience of folks like you, Shams, and the others who have asked questions tonight. Absolutely. But, you know, as Maya mentioned earlier, there's opportunity, there's distressed properties. The city shouldn't borrow to cover operating expenses. Let's borrow and invest in properties and buildings. Let's take advantage of the excess hotel and real estate space. Let's work on flexibility with our building and zoning codes. There's all kinds of things that we can do that can lead to permanent housing and establish a completely different value proposition for all New Yorkers.
Maya?
Yeah, look, I've spent a lot of time with both of you and with the men at the Lucerne and with the Open Hearts. And what you've established, I think, is a model. And that model is not congregate shelter. That model, and first of all, I think that model could be permanent housing, right? But which is where you have a door that you open and close, and that's your own. And Shams, as you have said so often in public and to so many, that's actually one of the things that has helped get rates and support treatment for addiction and create significantly better outcomes, including on-site services, which of course is also what supportive housing is. So in my view, it's housing. It is SRO models and other models where you have your own apartment and where the services that are necessary are on site, and where there is a relationship with the community, and that is government's responsibility to help broker those conversations. Open Hearts did it on its own, but it's a model that shows what works, that makes communities safe and the folks who are in the housing safe, and everyone deserves that dignity.
Catherine?
We cannot have a policy that is about shelter. We have to have a policy that is about housing and about permanent housing so that everyone has dignity. Housing heals. Housing helps with mental illnesses. Housing helps with your ability to get a job. Housing is sort of at the forefront. And we do have an opportunity right now to look at distressed properties, to convert things to SROs. We can be agile in this time of crisis to really make a phenomenal step forward about stop thinking of people who are experiencing housing as the answer is shelter rather than the answer is a home.
Shams, I'm going to let you have the last word. We're going to switch over to the next group.
So there's always a controversy about SROs. And what we want to imagine is something that's different, which might require an outlay of, your budget would have to support this. So when we look at the hotels, a lot of them are never coming back. When we look at some of the office space, some of them won't come back either. And if we have to reimagine them into permanent housing solutions, we don't want a situation that existed like the SROs in the past. We want to create real dignified dwellings for people, so we're looking at places that may be in the kitchenette type of model. We're looking at places where people can have their space, can use their own restrooms and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind, that there's gonna take some type of investment from the city in order to redevelop these properties.
And I want to note to the candidates, thank you so much for joining us. I want to note we're sending a follow-up survey. I'd like to get your commitment that you're going to fill that out. That is from directly impacted people. The questions are from directly impacted people, and we want to get you on record with some of these answers. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to switch over to our next group. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well. Be safe.
Thank you.
Stay strong.
Bye.
All right, it takes a little minute to get everybody on screen, but we're working on that. All right, Shams, you want to introduce our second group?
Yes. Okay. Oh, I got a distinguished. I love all of you. I love all of you. Okay, so our second group is Eric Adams, Sean Donovan, Diane Morales, and Scott Stringer. Again, we're going to do this alphabetically. And so, Eric, will you answer first? Roll the tape.
And again, everyone's going to be muted while we roll the tape.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Belcher. My question tonight is simple. If you become mayor, what does the future look like for unsheltered homeless who are living on the streets or in the subways and are now currently living in a hotel like myself? Also, what does the future look like for those who are still currently street and subway homeless? Thank you.
All right, so that question goes to Eric first. You have 90 seconds.
I want to set my clock. So if I understood the question right, she was asking for street homeless and what is it going to look like for.
And she's currently in a hotel, so particularly with that in mind.
The goal, and I'm pretty sure we all say, the goal is real permanent housing. How do you cycle people out into permanent housing? And if they are in a hotel, how do you do it in a dignified manner? Sort of some of the things we did here in Brooklyn when there were major attempts to displace people who were homeless. We went to those communities and stated that you need to be engaged with the residents who are in the temporary housing location, in the hotels. You need to be part of, if you are a financier, do financial literacy. If you an educator, go in and do tutorials. Build relationships, because homeless people are not strangers. They are family members who have fallen on hard times. And we have been able to do some great projects in Kensington, great projects in Park Slope, great projects in Crown Heights, where people, instead of looking down on people because they fell on hard time, they embrace them. This is a song I know. I went to school every day carrying a garbage bag full of clothing because we thought our family was going to be displaced. And it wasn't until mom was able to stabilize us. So I know we need to treat people with the dignity. If you're in a hotel, let's treat you with the dignity while you're there and transition you into permanent housing.
That goes to Sean next. You have 90 seconds. Thank you so much.
Corinne, it's great to see you again. Shams, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Look, My career in public service began because I grew up in New York City watching homelessness explode on our streets. I started volunteering in a homeless shelter in college. I went and interned with the National Coalition for the Homeless. And I know from 30 years of work that homelessness is a solvable problem. If I were mayor, we would end street homelessness in New York City, and we would do it by reimagining the right to shelter as a right to housing. I know we can house anyone. Now we have to house everyone. And that's what I did when I led the strategy for President Obama. We dramatically reduced street and family homelessness around the country. And where we were able to marshal the resources focused on veterans, we ended veteran homelessness in more than 80 cities and states. Not reduced it, ended it. The problem is we have a mayor right now who thinks you can solve homelessness with homeless programs. And that is fundamentally wrong. We need every person at the table, every commissioner who touches homelessness in any way, the health commissioner, we need criminal justice at the table, we need mental health. All of those pieces have to come together if we're going to reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing and end street homelessness.
Thank you. Over to Diane. Oh, wait, Shams wants to follow up. Go ahead.
So, Sean, and I want to speak to Ashley's question. Corinne, reiterate Ashley's questions because that's what I want the answer to be for.
Yeah, so we're specifically talking about unsheltered homeless people. So beyond COVID, what happens to them? She's in a hotel right now. Does she get, thrown back into a congregate shelter where people may then end up back on the street? So I'm going to let Diane go, and then we're going to follow up so we can get everybody to make sure they answer that question.
Thanks, Corinne. Hi, everybody. Hi, Shams. It's good to see you. So, my campaign is based on the notion of addressing the structural and systemic issues that have led to the disparities in this city. And the reality of it is that Black and Brown communities have been disproportionately impacted by homelessness. And unless we recognize the racism that is inherently connected to that, we're not going to go anywhere. Everything else is just a Band-Aid. So, the first thing I would start off by saying is that I am committed to guaranteeing housing for all. That means everyone that is currently in the shelter system or on the streets should be immediately housed. We have the vacant properties that are available right now. If we had the political and the moral will and commitment to make it happen, every single person could have access to a permanent home. And that is what I commit to. We need to recognize the gross injustices that have led to this current system. And we need to make a commitment that we're going to address it and we're going to make housing available for everyone. We need to move away from this broken shelter system and commit to permanent housing for all New Yorkers.
Oops, over to Scott, sorry.
Scott. Unmute Scott.
All right. I do this all the time, by the way. Well, it's good to see you, Sham, Corinne, and to my colleagues. Look, I think this question, and I thank you for this question, speaks to what we have to do, but we have to be specific. The de Blasio administration and the Bloomberg administration built affordable housing that was unaffordable for the people who needed it the most. In de Blasio's case, he worked with Rebney luxury developers, gave them all the land, and then in return, hoped for affordable housing, but the AMI wasn't low enough for the people who were living in homeless shelters. I want to radically change that. I want to take the vacant properties that the city owns. I want to give them not to Rebney developers, but back to community-based organizations with a subsidy that would be directed to reward low-income housing, and finally align the housing and homeless crisis. Because right now we are spending billions managing people in dangerous shelter conditions. I've done the investigations more than any other candidate. I know what exactly is going on in these shelters, and it is outrageous. So step one, we have got to transition people not into another shelter. In other words, we're not going to look at the Lucerne and bounce 280 people from shelter to shelter like human cattle, but we are going under my administration into building housing with a specific plan called Universal Affordable Housing, setting aside 15% of that housing for homeless individuals and leveraging the 1,000 vacant lots and building land bank and community trusts.
Thank you, Scott. I heard a Larry Thomas quote there because that was his quote about moving people from the Lucerne like human cattle. Larry Thomas was in the Lucerne until recently. Shams, do you have follow-ups to that to nail them down?
I was at the press conference, so I was listening.
Yes, and that's great. I just want to say, I mean, all of you said something that speaks to me. When you talk about space and property, and you talk about the AMI, which is something that I'm coming to learn about. Does that? I just want to ask. I'm sorry, I'm trying to learn too. But with the AMI, I understand that there's issues with the zoning laws and the rezoning that could determine what that AMI is. And when you speak about how the current and the previous administration kind of like catered more to rich developers and help build these luxury developments that change the AMI. What would you do to change all of that? I'm going to start with Eric.
First thing we should do is what I did in Borough Hall, and that's partner with our faith-based institutions. We don't do that enough. They don't build for profit, they build for people. You want to talk about people who are committed. We had something in Borough Hall called Building by Faith, where we partnered with our faith-based institutions that had available space. I think that's our first place we should go when we look at, do we want to build permanent housing? Do we want to build affordable housing? Do we want to build
Is that going to be enough to solve the housing crisis, the sort of available space from faith institutions?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Is that going to be enough to solve the housing crisis, the available space from faith institutions?
No, what I stated that we should start with that. This first place we should start with when we talk about creating real partnership should not be going out looking for developers. We should look for local developers.
And what percent of AMI are you going to make that available for?
Yeah, but the AMI, as he was raised in, is not the AMI that falls within the span of control of the mayor. That is based on the area median income in the community. The mayor
You don't need to change the AMI, but you can change when you build housing where it's targeted to.
And what we can do is to have a more focus on the affordability. The more subsidies the city puts in, the better we can have a lower income and a lower rent for those who are involved. That's why I say your partners mean a lot. Some of the stuff we've done with the developers of faith-based institutions in Brooklyn, we want to bring down.
Great, thank you. Diane, do you want to follow up on that?
Yes, I do. So Shams, I want to speak directly to you about this, right? I think the issue with AMI, first of all, is that it's created by the existing housing system, and that's problematic, right? Because it dictates how much you should be earning in order to apply for a certain apartment. We could actually make the decision to move away from using AMI as a measure that's going to make you qualify or not qualify for housing, right? Because right now, when we use the AMI system, that actually it automatically includes a kickback for the developer, right? So we could actually make a decision as a city that we're going to prioritize social housing and cooperative housing that actually puts you at the forefront and provides the investment to you as the resident and the tenant instead of giving the kickback to the developer. AMI is never going to really solve our housing crisis. We actually have to move away from that. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about how we need to re-envision housing and reimagine housing for New York City. It's moving away from this existing model of how housing is developed, because that doesn't center you or the people that need housing.
Thanks so much, Diane. So I want to honor Ashley's question, about how unsheltered individuals are going to be treated. And I want to go to Sean and ask, part of her question is, when COVID is over, am I going to be back, getting swept off the street by the NYPD, moved to a new location, displaced without being offered privacy, being offered an unsafe spot in a congregate shelter where I don't feel comfortable going? How are you going to handle reaching out to unsheltered folks in your administration?
So Corinne, let me just say one thing about the discussion we just had about AMI, because the truth is area median income, the problem is it's set for the entire metropolitan area. Despite what Diane said, it doesn't include a kickback to developers or anything. All it is an income level that is set for the regional area. The mayor has control to decide what percentage of AMI to set those units. And what it takes is a choice to create a truly affordable housing. And let's be clear about the math here. It costs about $500 a month to operate a unit. You could build a home for free, and the typical deeply low-income person in this city could not afford it. What you need is rental assistance, in addition to the capital subsidies the city can provide. My proposal is to work with the Biden administration for universal Section 8 access.
Okay, I'm giving you a few more seconds if you want to get in unsheltered individuals.
But this is critical. And my housing plan would dedicate enough rental assistance from the city to help 200,000 families a year afford housing. That is the—
Scott, do you want to address how you would actually handle unsheltered individuals?
Yes,
No,
unsheltered.
I'm going to pass it to Scott. Sorry, we're just out of time for that section.
Oh, if Sean wants to do, look at him. He wants to answer this, Corinne. I'll give him 20 seconds of my time.
Thank you, Scott. Very kind of you.
Sorry.
Look, in the long run, we need to build a system where folks don't end up on the street in the first place. In the short run, we need to absolutely be prioritizing rental assistance to those folks who are on the street that can go directly into housing. We should be changing our shelter system to move toward lower barrier, private room, like the safe haven model, to fundamentally— the current shelters are dangerous. They have inhuman conditions often. We're asking people to move to a place where they are not safe. And
Great, let's pass it to Scott. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me be clear. They are not safe. I just finished an audit of family shelters looking at how we treat infants, and what we found was absolutely outrageous. I had evidence of rat and mouse feces in cribs next to heaters, all the things that would keep a child safe. None of this is done almost in every shelter that we looked at. I was the controller who went in at the beginning of the Blasio administration and exposed the dangerous conditions in the shelters. Sean, this was left over from the Bloomberg administration. It didn't get better in the de Blasio administration. And if we are truly going to address this issue until we have enough affordable housing, we've got to change the shelter conditions. One of the things we also have to realize, everyone talks about eviction being the leading cause of people ending up in shelters. I have to tell you, right now, the leading cause, 40% of the family population entering homeless shelters is due to domestic violence. And there's a clock ticking for people staying in domestic violence shelters, 180 days. And then the families end up in the larger population where they can't get services. So let's get specific. We've got to reform the lease termination laws so that the survivors don't need a court order. We've got to create capacity in HRA for the domestic violence victims, and we have got to make these shelters safe.
So a quick poll, thank you so much. So a quick poll, are we ending NYPD participation in outreach to unsheltered New Yorkers or outreach to people who are in mental health crisis? Raise your hand if we are ending NYPD participation in that. Okay, so Eric, you look like the no. Tell me about that.
Because I need some clarity in your question. Are you saying under no circumstance should NYPD ever be involved in dealing with a person who is—
Tell me what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that NYPD should be a last resort, but if you look at the incident that happened in Chinatown, where an individual was assaulting 4 people, killed 4 people, he was participating in street homeless, and he was dealing with mental health illnesses. The police should be involved. So
I want to be clear that I think everybody probably who raised their hand thinks that NYPD should be involved in cases of violent crime. I think the question is—
Then you and I are on the same page. That's why I'm a person that likes clarity before I say yes to something. And that's why I ask for clarity, so I would never be misquoted.
Shams, you look like you want to jump in, then we got to go to the next question.
For Eric's sake, let me make the clarity. So when we talk about NYPD's participation, there's several things. Well, one might be the diversion unit. And I spoke on the previous thing about my experience being put in cuffs, brought to the station, being told that I'm not being arrested, that they're helping me out, and then they're going to get me to a safe space. But the traumatizing effect of having to go through that was just not my idea of the city helping me. And then being given, even threatened with a ticket, which could turn into a warrant unless I stay in the shelter. So that aspect, just on the first interaction, was just a negative reaction that I would say we don't need to have. And I know I'm asking if you support that.
Without a doubt, brother, and trust me, and I know about traumatization by being arrested. Remember, I was arrested as a child, beat bad by police officers, and that trauma stays with you forever. We should not have police being involved in cases like that. That should have never happened to you. And arrest should not be the first response when you're dealing with Black men. And trust me, I know it, and I prevented it as 100 Blacks in law enforcement who care. So you're dead on. They should not be involved in it.
Thanks for that clarity, Shams. So we need to go to the next question. So let's go ahead and roll the tape. Again, we're going to mute everybody. So when you come back, you're going to have to unmute.
This is from my good friend, Larry.
Hello, my name is Larry, and I've been homeless for 2.5 years, including at the temporary New Sound Hotel. We moved people into hotels because congregated shelters were not COVID safe. However, in my experience in congregated shelters is that they are not safe or healthy, period, for a variety of reasons. Will the administration commit to end congregated shelters for the mental and physical health of homeless New Yorkers?
All right, so that question goes to Sean first. Did you get all that?
I did. And I would reiterate something I said before, which is absolutely we should be moving away from the current shelter model toward lower barrier, private room, like safe havens, and make sure that conditions are humane. Literally, we are asking folks to trust us to go to places that are inhumane in their conditions. But I think I will keep going back to, we need to go upstream and make sure that we're preventing homelessness in the first place. We need to make sure that every time someone leaves, whether it's Rikers, a mental health wing of a hospital, any situation where they're at risk at homelessness, we have a coordinated strategy to connect them to the services and housing they need. And we reimagine our current system of rental assistance. We don't wait till somebody's evicted for them to become eligible. We provide rental assistance in advance that makes sure they don't become homeless in the first place. That's the way we solve this problem, not just put a Band-Aid on it.
Before we pass it, how long is it going to take you to end the congregate shelter system when you get into office?
My commitment is that by the end of my first term, it would be done.
All right, thank you so much. So Diane, to Larry's question, are you going to end the congregate shelter system?
Yes, I mean, again, I'd like to end the shelter system, period. I think we need to move towards permanent housing for everyone. And that means, places where people can live in dignity. I've done that before. I've created supportive housing for homeless young people. When I was at the door, I've created supportive housing for adults when I was working in the South Bronx. This is something that I know how to do. I would make a commitment to getting people into their own permanent homes where they can live with dignity and feel good and have a key to their door every single day.
So, and what's the path for getting there? Just given that we have, 60,000 people in the DHS system right now, what's the path?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different options that we're not exercising right now, right? I think if we move the investments that we are currently making in the shelter system and the providers into subsidizing housing, that's one pathway. I think we're talking about needing to rezone and upzone. I don't want to say upzone because that gets into another conversation. Having flexible zoning and taking over vacated spaces, vacant apartments, vacant storefronts, being flexible about repurposing those spaces. We have enough space right now to do this. So I think that's part of what I would do in the more immediate to get people with a space a roof over their heads. But we need to move towards permanent housing. I don't want to keep talking about shelters. The shelter system does not work for our people. People need to have a home, and that's what we need to focus on and prioritize.
Thank you so much. Over to Scott.
So this is if you're really going to end the shelter system, then you're going to have a real housing plan. It's not going to happen because you say in X years. And we're not going to be able to just rely on a housing program that is minimalist in its thinking. You know, part of the Bloomberg de Blasio crisis was that they basically build housing for families who make over $77,000 a year. And the problem is, according to an analysis I did as controller, 435,000 of the city's severely rent-burdened households can't afford the housing that we've been building for the last 16 years. And this is over multiple administrations. And right now, we have to build housing for the 30% of the people who work in the shelter system. We have to build low-income housing. We have 19,000 adults in the shelter system. They need supportive housing. So the question is, talk is cheap. How are we going to get there? My housing plan would take the 1,000 vacant properties that the city owns and give that to community-based organizations, the kind of organizations that Diane worked for. But I wouldn't stop there because that's not going to solve it. We've got to start looking at what we call as of right development. I know the developers get all freaky about this, but the truth is we have got to set aside in those developments 25% affordable housing. We are in a national housing emergency. We are in a city emergency. And by the way, the 435,000 number I gave you, Corinne, that was pre-COVID. Right now, we have a housing emergency. And I worry that we are thinking short-term, we're making promises without specific plans, and we need a housing plan that's going to grab everyone's attention. Now, I'm not saying I have all the ideas and the answers, but we're going to have to be more bold in our thinking. We do have to set aside 50% of that development for low-income, for homeless families.
Thank you so much. We got to pass it over to Eric, and then we'll let you jump in right after. Eric, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. That's the word of the day. You're muted. I agree with Scott. You look at the numbers. When you're talking about 60,000, just to say that we could wave a magic wand and instantly have the building done is just that's not a real plan. But what we must do is have a transparent system. Something that I call for all the time. Our city must run in real time. We need to identify how we trending towards the numbers we are looking for. Are we reaching our specific target areas? We can't do it in the blind. We can't continue to go year by year and say, oops, here are the numbers. And if we had a real system matching the numbers that we are trying to move into permanent housing with the numbers that we are building, where the numbers are going to be, no matter what plan that we use to transition people into permanent housing, we must have transparency, and it should be done in real time with a dashboard system so we can see the exact direction we're moving in. And is our plan on target? That's how you run a city in the 21st century like this.
Thank you, Shams.
Thank you, Eric, for saying that, because you just brought me to my follow-up question. So I want to know, and this is important, what about how DHS, when you talk about transparency, which DHS is one of the least transparent agencies that you have within the city, what about how DHS operates that you all feel needs to be changed? When we think about that, we think about the transfers, the accommodations, the LGBT community, safety, on-site services, et cetera. What about DHS would you change? Start with Diane.
Great. So, I have done a lot of work with DHS over the last 15 years. I started the Doors First Street Outreach Program for young adults. And our young adults had to be on the street for a certain period of time before they could qualify for any support from DHS. They couldn't be couch surfing at someone's house. They couldn't be staying at a relative's house. That did not qualify them. That is highly problematic. The idea that we actually set it up so that people have to be on the streets even when they don't have permanent housing in order to qualify is problematic. The relationship that DHS has right now with NYPD, where NYPD does these sweeps that you were talking about sooner, is highly problematic. We need to actually be getting people out into the street that have those experiences, peers, professionals, supports. That's who we need to be focused on. The other thing is, in shelters right now, I fought DHS for 10 years because I wanted to provide services to help our families get jobs, get degrees, and I was not allowed to use any money to do that because all they wanted was for me to push people out.
So I want to go to Scott. Thank you. And Scott, while you're implementing your housing plan, what do you do with the people in shelter right now? What has to change?
Well, I can take you through every investigation I've done in the last 7 years, demanding that there has to be safe conditions for single adults, for families, for domestic violence victims. All of this is not happening. I went in early in 2014 and blew the lid off the shelter system and identified these dangerous conditions. And I didn't stop there. The most horrific investigation we just did was the one talking about babies, children in cribs with mice feces, children near heaters, as I mentioned earlier. This is not how the greatest city in the world should treat our children. And, as Eric makes the point, and you make the point about 60,000 people sleeping tonight in a shelter, we forget that 30,000 of that 60 are our children, all of our children, and we have failed.
Yes.
So
thank you so much. So over to Sean again. What has to change about how we operate right now in the shelter system while you're getting the housing built?
Well, this goes to Sham's question as well. And I said earlier that the problem is we have a mayor who thinks you can solve homelessness with homeless programs. And fundamental to changing that is what I did in the Obama administration, which is create an interagency council on homelessness that brings everyone to the table. And as Diane said, we have to make sure that we are organizing this entire system by putting the people living in those shelters and on our streets first, and by leading with the housing and the services that they need, not with shelters first. And all of the entire system has to revolve around that. I would also go back and say I would dedicate $350 million a year to help 200,000 families with rental assistance to avoid homelessness in the first place, but also to be able to move much more quickly to move folks, as Shams knows, into permanent housing. Right now, it takes 6 months in this system to move someone from shelter to housing.
Sometimes it takes 3 years. Great. Over to Eric. What needs to change right now?
And I agree. And again, you're going to hear me say this over and over again. A better coordination of services within all of our agencies, particularly DHS. Really, we have to take the guessing game out of government and coordinate those services. When you look at children who are in homeless services now, they're less likely to graduate from high school. If we don't educate, we incarcerate. We need to make sure we get immediate services to those children, everything from iPads, everything from making sure that they have eyeglasses, dental services. We need to ensure that those who are in our homeless system, as we cycle them out, receive wraparound services, and then partner with organizations like Fountain House, an amazing organization that's doing amazing things and deal with those who are dealing with mental health illnesses and street homelessness. So it's about, for me, it's immediately giving the wraparound services that's
Great.
needed.
Thank you so much. And Shams has pointed out a really important thing is having those services on site. Unfortunately, we're a little bit short on time, so we have to get to our next video question. So we're going to roll tape.
My name is Roberto Mangual. I've been a shelter tenant for 2 years. And my question to you upcoming running mayors is, what is your point of view on Intro 146, which is pushing to assist to bring up City Fest 5 voucher prices to city rent levels? And how do you plan on supporting and pushing this bill if you plan to back it?
Great. So that goes to Diane first.
Hi. So two parts to my response to that. One is that, yes, we can push to increase the voucher levels so that it meets the current market rate. I don't think that's going to solve the long-term problem. The long-term problem is the lack of affordability in this city and the way the housing market in New York focuses on the speculative and the for-profit of developers. So we need to actually be willing to take that on and take away the profit-based focus of our housing in the city and actually reorient our housing development so that we're centering our communities and giving our communities a leading role in housing development and increasing community ownership and decision-making in housing. That's the long-term, that's the right solution.
Thank you. Over to Scott.
Thank you.
I agree that the vouchers must be useful and pay the market rent. And, we're on tonight with people who are homeless, and many of you know the real deal. Your promised vouchers. I was in a homeless shelter where I was walking around, no press conference, no attention, just to learn, talking to people who had the voucher. The social worker was talking about the voucher. And the people in the shelter knew that there was no affordable or landlord who would take the voucher. So what are we doing here? We have got to change this paradigm. We are giving false hope with the voucher when someone can't get an affordable housing. You know that better than any politician because you're just following the rules. And I do believe that we have to fundamentally change this paradigm because we're going to be back here when one of us is running for re-election, and we're going to be making all kinds of excuses if we incrementally change the system. And I think that it is a good council bill, sure, but how many units will be available for those vouchers? Talk to me about that.
Great. Over to Eric. Or Shams, you want to jump in before? You're muted though.
So let me ask you a question. So the vouchers, right? What I want to know is this, because that is a major issue. We got Prop 146. There's something else going on in the state. And right now, we got to look at it for what it is, as Scott was talking about. In the shelters, we're here at a cost of maybe $3,500 a month. In the hotels, it's even more, maybe $5,000, $6,000, depending on your household.
But FEMA's reimbursing it, just to be clear.
Yeah. So, well, no, actually, before FEMA, pre-COVID, we're in here for $3,500 a month. So the notion that the money's not there is kind of, no, that don't exist. But the vouchers at $1,250 or $1,200, it makes no sense. If we had the $3,500 to go into permanent housing, I'm sure we would find housing. So my question is, this is an immediate thing that if you got into the office, we know the current administration is about shelters. You're all saying housing first. So if you got into office, I want to know from each of you, will you commit, if you say housing first, at least to raising that voucher to a affordable rate or market rate or something that a sensible rate within your first 100 days?
All right, let's get over to Eric and you can answer that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it didn't come through? Yes.
And you can answer the whole question. You can speak more. You didn't get to speak on this yet.
I just want to, clarity. Yes, and not only that, let's be clear. I'm a small property owner. I own a 4-family house. My rent, when my tenants moved in almost 13 years ago, in the lease I signed with them, I said that as long as you live with me, I could never raise your rent. I signed that into the lease. They are paying half of what you would get in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And one tenant fell on hard times. She had to go a year and a half without being able to pay rent. And I told her, don't worry about it, sister. We're going to work this through. The city wanted me to take her to court. And I said, I'm not messing up her credit. That is the type of attitude we need to have, not only in the mayor, but everyday people that own property.
Great. Over to Sean.
Thanks, Corinne. So Shams, the answer is yes. I would commit to raising it in my first 100 days, but I would do 2 other things as well. We should recognize that it's not just the city's voucher program that's broken. When I was HUD secretary, I created a much higher standard that was specific to the community, not to the metropolitan area for vouchers the way we currently have. Ben Carson and Donald Trump undid that. I'm working with President Biden to get that back in place and to make Section 8 vouchers universally available. Only 1 in 4 people that need one is eligible right now. But we should also recognize another thing that discrimination against voucher holders is a big part of the problem as well. Even if they pay market rent, we get way too many landlords who say, oh, you're coming out of the shelter system. You know what? It's already rented. I'm sorry. They don't tell you you're the wrong color. They don't tell you they don't want to rent to somebody that they've stereotyped and discriminated against. We need a mayor who's actually going to enforce the law, which says that you cannot discriminate based on source of income. I helped create that standard at the federal level. We need a mayor who's going to enforce it, because otherwise raising the voucher amount isn't going to be enough.
I know Scott needs to hop off. So next follow up just to Scott real fast. And I know he needs to hop.
Shams, it is mind-boggling that these slumlords, because that's what they are getting $3,500 a month. That's Waldorf Astoria prices. And I do think to expand on the housing program I want to bring to the city, I want to also recognize that post-pandemic, we're going to have a lot of vacant commercial space. We're going to have a lot of vacant hotels. And I think we have an opportunity to create the next generation of housing as a way of expanding on the plan that I already have.
Thank you so much for joining us. Shams, what you want to throw a follow up to the broader group?
No, if Scott has something to finish, I'll let him finish.
Thank you, Shams. And the only thing I really want to say is to all the people listening tonight, this is a very powerful forum, and I want to congratulate Open Hearts. We don't talk to the people who are impacted. We see people out on the street who are homeless. We know about it intellectually. We think we're developing the programs, but the truth of the matter is the next mayor has got to invite the homeless community into City Hall to sit and talk about how we reconstruct this city post-COVID. We cannot open up this economy the same way we closed it. And we can't build housing the old way. We have to build it first for the people who need it the most. Lastly, Shams, one of the things that always shocked me about Bloomberg and de Blasio, it was always a race to build affordable housing. The Bloomberg's people wanted 160,000. De Blasio wanted 200,000. We ended up building very little housing for the people who are in homeless shelters or the people who are about to be in homeless shelters. I just want to pledge to everybody, I hear you. We're going to build it, and we're going to build it back better. Thank you. I got to go to another screen.
Thank you so much. Diane, do you want to get in some last words? We're about to switch over, but do you want to get in some last words?
Yeah. I just want to say that unlike Scott, I've actually been talking to the people that are homeless for the last 15 years. I've been doing the work with the homeless people for the last 15 years. So I know what our homeless folks need. although I will obviously continue to partner with folks like Shams and others that are willing to do that. I also want to say one last thing about this. We can talk about what we need to do within the confines of the current framework and the current boundaries for housing in order to make it possible for folks to get access to housing. But I don't think that's enough, because I don't think that's going to change the cycle of homelessness. I think we actually need to make a commitment that we're going to change the way housing and affordability happens in New York City so that we don't actually have this problem. And that's what I'm committing to. I don't want to keep playing within the same box that has actually led to this moment and led to these problems. We have to acknowledge that it's not working, and we have to actually commit to transforming that. And that means centering you.
Thank you. Eric, any last words? Oh, you're muted, Eric. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Again.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really impressed. And I think this is probably the first time in a mayoral candidacy that we've had a group like yours doing this. And this is so important. And I'm encouraging people to go to my site, Eric Adams 2021, and look at
no ads, but thank you. Is there anything you want to say about the issue?
Well, that right there is where we point out the issues. And I think that Diane is right. It's about reimagining this entire system, putting people into permanent housing. I think that some of the things she has done throughout the years on this issue is profound. And I'm going to continue to speak with folks like I've done for the last 30 years of Simba, Asset, the two youth groups that are dealing with housing and homelessness, someone that has been advising us for years. So let's keep fighting this fight. This is a good, important fight. But the name of your group says it all. Let's open our hearts, because there by the grace of God go I.
But Eric, we never saw you on the Upper West Side. We would love it if you'd come visit.
I'm all over the city, and I'm not a stranger. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Eric Adams is known in New York City.
Eric, we need to see you over at the Lucerne, brother.
I would love to be
it's
there.
Sean and Diane, we've seen there.
Anytime. Please don't do this one thing though, brother. Do not define one's commitment to something based on where they're not at one place. I've been doing this for my people for years. Trust me, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this.
All right, Sean, we're gonna let you.
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Shams. Look, as you know, I grew up in this city watching homelessness explode. And I asked myself, how can it be in the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country on earth, we let folks sleep on our streets? And I'm still asking that question. I, for 30 years, have walked the walk on this, not just talk the talk. I was honored, Shams, when you all asked me to be an expert witness to help you stay and build a life at the Lucerne. And that's my commitment, to keep doing it. I've solved homelessness at the national level. I could solve it in New York with partners like you. And we just need to understand that this is a solvable problem. If we reimagine the right to shelter as a right to housing, that's who I've been. That's who I'm going to be as mayor.
Thank you so much to all of our candidates in this group. I'm going to let Shams talk and just comment on that section as we change over to the next group. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, we so appreciate all of you. All of you have brilliant ideas and brilliant minds, and we're looking forward, to more of these discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shams and Corinne. Really appreciate it. Be safe.
Big elbow bump to you, Shams. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Corinne. It's great to see you.
Are we ready?
Carlos, Ray, and Joycelyn. There we go. All right, Shams, you want to go ahead and introduce our third group of candidates?
Yes. So now we've got our third and last group of candidates, Carlos Menchaca, Ray McGuire, and Joycelyn Taylor. I said it right? You're mute.
Joycelyn, yes.
Joycelyn, okay, I wanted to make sure. All right, so Carlos, will you answer first? We're gonna do this in alphabetical order. Okay. Let's roll the tape.
We're waiting for that first question to roll. Sorry, we're having a.
Like to know why sometimes it takes so long to move to a permanent housing. And as a mayor, what you gonna do to change that situation?
Sorry, that was from our friend Uni, who's over at the Lucerne, and he said, I would like to know why sometimes it takes so long to move into permanent housing from the shelter. And as mayor, what are you going to do to change that situation? Carlos, you first, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Corinne and Shams, for having us tonight. I think one of the things that I've learned as a city council member for the last 7 years is that the system is broken, mainly because at the top, we do not believe that housing is a human right. I think that part of what we are doing is keeping people in shelters longer than they have to. We are keeping them in shelters by building institutionalized requirements before we move them out into permanent housing. Rental assistance is not where it needs to be. I'm in support of and a proud sponsor of Intro 146 that can help shape a different pathway into permanent housing. Once that happens, very small percentage of New Yorkers come back to shelters. And so it's broken. The system is broken.
Thank you so much. Passing it to Joycelyn.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Corinne and Fasham, for having me tonight. I appreciate it. Yeah, we have a $3.2 billion failure to perform. And, you know, it should not take someone years in order to find permanent housing. I had a town hall with some individuals that work in the homeless industry and are homeless as well. And there was one young lady that's been in a shelter for 5 years. So we're willing to pay, but we're willing to pay on the wrong side of things. We're not willing to pay the result that we need to see, which is permanent housing for everyone, because housing should be a basic right. But what I would do as mayor to change it is that I would work to empower people to have more flexibility. Because the young lady that I spoke to that was in the shelter for 5 years is not in a permanent house because she makes $100 too much to qualify for anything that is supposed to be for her. And we have to understand that everything is not one size fits all. If we want to create affordable housing, if we want to create a system where we give people housing, then we have to untie our hands. We can't have a government that knows every reason why something can't happen. And we shouldn't have people working with the city and not working towards solving the problem. You can't go to someone who you're trying to help and tell them every reason why you can't help them. We have to figure out what we need to do to help people, and that's what I would do as mayor.
Thank you. Over to Ray. You're muted. So every time after a video plays, you might need to come off mute, just so you know.
I'm trying to get y'all's technology working here. How you doing, Corinne? Hello, Shams. Great to have you, have me. Listen, the answer is we need to prevent this from the outset. We need to take aggressive steps to prevent families and individuals from experiencing homelessness in the first place. We need to keep those who have homes, we need to keep them in their homes by providing rental subsidies. We need to give legal assistance. We need to advocate for additional Section 8 vouchers from the government. We also need to think of what is going to occur now when this eviction crisis that could be upon us due to COVID after the moratorium ends. And we got to think about the existing housing stock to determine where the vouchers and rental subsidies can help place people transitioning from other government programs, from the prison system, from the foster care, from hospitalization. You know, my approach to this is how I grew up. And I remember, and I've seen it here in New York City on one of the churches, it says, how can you worship a homeless man on Sunday and forget about him on Monday? And so we got to think about the least of thee. And how I grew up, and what is fundamental to me is the dignity of giving people not only the legal obligation, but the moral obligation to give people the right to shelter and put a roof over their head so a person has dignity. And so this is not intergenerational. So this has got to be the highest priority. We have to give dignity. We have to give homes. I know what it's like when that doesn't happen or when that's threatened. The bureaucracy today is a clear impediment to making certain that we don't forget about them on Monday.
Thank you so much. Shams, do you have any follow-ups to that? You're on mute.
I told you Yo's Technology was working here. Sham's been working that thing all night long.
So, well, the follow-up is this. So Uni was speaking about, and he's another undocumented person that struggled. He's been in the shelter system for 6 years, almost 6 years. And because being undocumented, he didn't have papers, he didn't have no way out of it. And his story, I mean, this guy's a great guy, but his story is horrific when you think about it. We were talking in the previous discussion about vouchers being $3,500. I mean, well, the cost to sit in a congregate shelter on a bed is $3,500 a month. Yet the vouchers are $1,200, and it just makes no sense. So basically, I would like to know, in your first 100 days, what would you do to change that dynamic? We're talking about the need for affordable housing, which with post-COVID, or we're seeing that there may be available housing through repurposing hotels that are never open back again. And then we have buildings, office buildings that may need to be repurposed as well. What would you do within the first 100 days of your administration to turn this whole thing around?
Whom are you asking? Who was that?
I'm gonna go with Joycelyn.
That's an excellent question. And, one of the things that we first have to do, and I've already done, is understand that homelessness has become big business. So we have to put the big business of homelessness out of business, because it shouldn't be about making money. It should be about providing affordable housing for people and a decent place for them to stay. But within the first 100 days, one of the things that I talked about at a previous forum is that this pandemic has brought the understanding that we will have additional commercial housing stock that we can use to create permanent housing for homeless people. In the first 100 days, and I hope that we address this prior to me being in office, but in the first 100 days, if we haven't addressed it, that will be my first line of defense. How do we get homeless people in permanent, stable housing? Because stable housing creates stable communities, and that's what the homeless need.
Carlos, you want to follow up on that?
Thank you, Corinne. Absolutely. So, Sham, you know that I'm a council member, and we can do things right now. We need to pass Intro 146 that can shift the power of the FAPS program, the city FAPS program, and bring more money into someone's hands to get them into permanent housing. That's one thing we can do.
Can you explain really fast why that makes so much financial sense, just for people who might not know?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, the federal number right now that we're getting to meet, like you said, is at $1,200 some dollars. If we can bring it up to closer to 2,000 and plus, we can actually bring more financial stability to a family so that they can not only pay rent, but be stabilized in their home. What's really important about this conversation is that there's a big gap right now that displacement has been felt for communities across the entire city. And I'm glad you talked about the undocumented community right now, because that's a community that I've been working with as with as the chair of the Immigration Committee. And so much work and casework comes from one person, let alone a family, that needs legal assistance on the federal case, housing assistance on the housing case, job placement. There's so much casework, and I don't believe that we have enough case support for one individual that Uni could possibly have right now to ensure that they're navigating the systems throughout the city of New York.
Your first 100 days, Carlos.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing. We can do things right now. First 100 days. We need to begin the injection of capital funding for the building of actual permanent housing. 1, 2, using the capital budget, we can actually go back and make sure that all the shelters have what they need. One of the biggest issues right now is Wi-Fi, making sure that people have what they need, and especially our kids that will be, I don't know how long we're going to be in COVID, and we may have to go back into COVID operations to ensure that kids have what they need for connecting to schools. And the last thing I want to say is that if we are serious about moving moving away from spending so much time and effort. $3 billion goes into homelessness right now. That money can be used to give people a universal basic income. And this is different from the FEPS program to get into housing, permanent housing. And I think we can make that happen in the city of New York.
Thank you so much. So Ray, when I toss it to you, I want you to talk about the 100 days like Shams asked, but I also want you to comment on what Carlos said about raising the voucher and also about making it inclusive of undocumented New Yorkers, and let us know your position on those issues.
So the answer is, one, on vouchers, we do need to raise the price of the vouchers. And two, we need to, again, because it's such a fundamental issue, the housing, the right to housing, a moral obligation. I see it a right to housing. We should include those, the least of the way I know, the way that I know about it, and make it available to them. So yes, I would be in favor of that. I would also make certain, given my management experience, what I would do with respect to the vouchers, you got to make certain the vouchers are recognized and respected, because they're not everywhere. And so we need to address that. So my response to the vouchers in specific is raise them, and also make certain that they get recognized and acknowledged in some ways, which they're not. Now, what do I do the first 100 days? The first 100 days, I would take my management experience and I would cut through the bureaucracy. I would streamline the services across the agencies. I'd invest in what works. And the other thing that I would do is I would take a look at, and I hear you talking about some of the transition. This is hard work. This is going to take, we're going to have to really invest here. And what I mean by that, you got to consider all options. You got to expand affordable housing stock through quality basement apartments, across accessory dwelling units, and communal housing. So you got to consider all of it. All this talk about building affordable housing, it's going to take a while. And the other thing that we should know is that this problem existed long before George Floyd and COVID. And so all the people are now coming up with all of these solutions. We should have been working with you before to address these things and have the sense of urgency that's required.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to go to our next video question. Shams, go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry, but Ray just hit on something. If you don't mind, I apologize. I'm interested to know, there's this thing about tax the rich, right? And trying to reappropriate, even to defund the police, the police NYPD thing. I would like to know if you had any, and I'm gonna start with you, Ray, and we could go. If you had any strategy on how to work with corporations and wealthy people in order to help solve some of the problems that we need to solve post-recovery, homeless being one of the major ones.
Ray, give us a quick answer.
Shams, absolutely. What we have not had, Shams, what has been absent here for this administration is any kind of public-private partnerships. There are many available dollars out here that are prepared to be invested in solving what is a fundamental issue in this city. So yes, I have the relationships. And yes, I would want you and Corinne at the table with me so that we can identify what's working and invest in what's working. And we have the relationship to be able to do this. But right now, we've left all of this to government. We cannot fund just automatically investing in, which is part of my program, which is to get economics back and to get the homeless working and to put them in transition services and to make sure they're part of a bridge program so that you have workforce training so we get the jobs so that people want the jobs.
Carlos, do you want to jump in on that at all?
Pardon?
Yeah,
Carlos.
I do. My quick thing is, I am skeptical of working with the private community for a couple reasons. We have yet to do what we can as the government. We have not fully funded our vision of housing being a human right. That is the government's responsibility. And we haven't even gotten to that point. And so I think before we invite the private sector, we got to do our promise. And we haven't done that yet. And so I think that this is why I'm just a little bit hesitant to say yes to moving into a corporate relationship right now. There's a lot of strings that get attached and a lot of bottom lines that are different. And so I think the government can do more.
Okay.
Can I react to that, please?
Yep, Joycelyn.
Part of
Sorry,
why
Ray, we're going to go to Joycelyn. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I have to agree because we do have some partnerships at this moment. We have partnerships with corporate developers, and we see how that 75-25% deal is not working out because the role of developers and people in corporations is to make money. The role of the government is supposed to be to help people. So unless we can have a partnership where the corporations understand what our role is and how we won't, sway from what the role is of what our agenda is, then it wouldn't work. We can't have partnerships where 75-25 and the people are the ones that suffer. We've already done that with affordable housing. It's not working.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to the next video question because we want to make sure we get those voices here. So let's roll that tape.
Thank you.
That's the wrong one.
Nope, we got it.
17, and I would like to briefly go over some of the things that I've been going through. I've been in transitional housing for the past 4 years. All right. In my community, I keep seeing these buildings going up, luxury apartments, terraces. I know some of that money has to be coming from the city for these people to be able to get these, for the buildings to go up. So my question would be, can we get a commitment of 100% of some of the housing to go to residents such as myself who have been in transitional housing so we can have a place where we can have permanent housing?
Great. So just in case anybody didn't hear everything, so this is someone who's in transitional housing, seeing luxury buildings go up and asking for a commitment for some of them, especially those subsidized by the city, to go to people in need in transitional housing and who are homeless. Joycelyn, we'll start with you.
Yes, and that commitment needs to be made because that's the role of government, like I said, to impact people's lives. And I certainly understand what he's saying. And if we're being honest, we've actually created this homeless situation by building affordable housing that is only 75%, that is only 25% affordable when we know we have a city where the majority of the residents make $15 an hour. $15 an hour and $2,000 rents are never going to match. So we have to have a huge commitment from the city to take money from other capital projects, things like the jail projects. If we take that money and we actually invest it in building true affordable housing and giving people permanent housing, then we will reduce the amount that we're spending on the other end that we're not seeing return on investment anyway. I go back to the $3.2 billion failure to perform. We have to, the partnership cannot be about helping developers develop. The city's role is to create housing. That's what our agenda needs to continue to be.
So Ray, over to you. Are you going to commit to some of that new development going to people, who are very low income? And what % of AMI should be targeted with that?
So that's a great question. I do want to address something that just adds to the divisive narrative that we have encountered for so many years. We can't be divided. This city has to come together. We can't point the fingers and say it is responsibility of one part of the city versus the other part of the city. What we know in the 70s when we addressed this crisis is that business, labor, and government came together. Labor bought the bonds. In order for us to survive, we got to stop all this divisive language. We got to come together. And so, yes, we do need to have public-private partnerships. And yes, as I said from the outset, I want Shams and Corinne there with me to make certain that this gets designed in the right way so that we address what we have not addressed, and that is truly affordable housing. And the way I think about this is I'm going to build to those who today make $15,000 to $30,000. Today, they pay 60 to 70% of their income in rent. That is not truly affordable housing. So part of my economic plan is to build truly affordable housing. It used to be the case we built 2.2 units of housing for every job that we created. Today it's 0.5 units of housing. We have the wrong AMI, we have the wrong income category, and so we need to change that. And I would commit to changing that. I would commit to have truly affordable housing, and I would commit to having you at the table with me as we design the program. And I would commit to making certain that essentially we have a $4 billion deficit in the budget for the next 3 years. We just saw that there's a 15% decline in taxes, which is going to go against the budget. We have to grow our way out of this. And when we grow our way out of this, we got to grow together. We can't keep pointing the fingers. We got to come together. Otherwise, the homeless situation is only going to grow. We have to build truly affordable housing.
All right, I'm going to take it over to Carlos.
Available.
Carlos, and I'm going to ask for some specifics on building affordable housing.
Specifics. Well, Cedric just gave us some specifics that I want to say yes to. One is 100% affordable is where we need to go. In my district, there are 2 projects that I spend a lot of time, effort, and infusing with capital money with the Fifth Avenue Committee, a nonprofit developer. A nonprofit developer has a track record in the community and is committed to low 20 to 30% AMI, the numbers that our community wants. That was only able to happen with a lot of infusion of tax credits and city council dollars on top of city property. There's property all over the city, vacant lots and NYPD precincts, for example, that we can begin to start citing as new affordable, 100% affordable forever. We can do that. And so I do understand how Cedric is looking at these towers that are not going to be available for him, because the partnership that we have right now, and I agree that we have to come together. That is the only way to move forward. But the way that we're coming together right now does not work. It hasn't worked for Cedric. It hasn't worked for so many.
Just throwing out to the group, would you commit for new HPD units to go to people who are currently homeless or in transitional housing, rather than for everybody to be able to enter into a lottery, including people making $100,000 a year? So just, will you commit to that? Show of hands, and then we'll get some comments.
Yes.
Okay, Joycelyn, any comment on that? Oh, you're muted.
That is definitely something I would commit to. And we do done a ton of data analysis in this city. And I think that we need to utilize that data and build housing based upon what we know are the demographics of households, based upon what we know are the incomes of households. We can't just go by AMI, because that's not a model that works. Listen, every policy, law, and procedure in this city has been implemented by an ordinary man or woman. If it's not working, we have to fix it. And I don't think that it's about being divisive. It's about making sure that we create win-win situations for everyone. And that's what we need to do in this city.
So over to Ray, are you going to end the housing lottery? Who should be eligible to it? How are you going to handle that?
Am I going to add to the housing?
End the housing lottery.
The housing lottery is part of the bureaucracy that doesn't work. We have to have alternatives to that. And so the commitment that I made, this is what I've talked about from the outset, is looking at all the available options today. First 100 days is the question that you ask. And then longer term, my plan is to build truly affordable housing. The lottery system doesn't work today. It's way too bureaucratic. It is not.
What are you replacing it with?
I'm going to replace it with, I looked through all the housing stock today that we're not using, including some of the conversions. That's what I'm going to replace it with, so that you don't have to actually go through the lottery, that there's a way for you to apply through a seamless system to make certain that if the need is there, that we can meet the need. And I'm going to look at all available options that exist today in the housing stock. And we haven't exhausted that.
So over to Carlos, how are you going to get people into that housing? And then Shams, let you.
Well, I think 2 things are really critical in this conversation. One is, if we move away from a lottery, which feels like that's the thing that creates equity in equal access to the opportunity, to prioritize the most vulnerable. And I would work with you and the coalition to figure out how we can create a prioritization of New Yorkers who need housing today. They're not just moving from one apartment to another, but really looking at New Yorkers who are not housed today, that have no security for housing, into those units, and to kind of really add to the conversation that there are apartments right now that are empty, that can be municipalized, that brought into an HPD program. There's a lot of corruption in HPD, and I think we need to look at that. But I think that we can bring them into a city project, a city program, and all of that will increase units for our communities.
Shams, did you need to jump in?
I was thinking about I'm still on the issue of how to fund all of these things, and I have a problem with just relying on the government, because the government has failed us so much.
Exactly.
I have a problem with just relying on nonprofits without oversight.
Right.
Like, you've been around, Carlos, in this. So, there's the question of why Prop 146 ain't passed yet. The other thing is, we've been doing this whole government petition and this and that. And what I'm seeing in the current administration is money wasted. Money just going here and there and not affecting.
Fact.
We need something different. And if it takes the fusion, then, why not be open to that? So my thing is, which one of you are capable of creating that fusion between the public and private sector in order to help our economy recover? Because homelessness is a product of something deeper, and that's the racial inequities among everything. And just keep in mind, it's 93 to 97% of people who are Black and brown that are languishing in these shelters. So I look at it from a systemic racial standpoint, because the policies that are in place only commodifies us and creates a system that perpetuates dependence, poverty, substance use disorder, and mental health illness. So what are we going to do to change that is the question. Sorry, Corinne. I'm going to go with
Joycelyn, go ahead.
Sham, and I think that that's a great question. And the thing about it is that we look at the system and we look at everything that's going on and transpiring right now. At the end of the day, what did we think was going to happen? I don't think it's just about government, but what did we actually think was going to happen when we partnered with developers and we allowed them to build apartments that were $2,000 rent? As a landlord, if you're looking at the next apartment and they're making $2,000 and you're charging $1,000, you're going to try to get your tenant out so that you can get the $2,000 as well. So we have to be cognizant of that in the way that we've operated that created this situation, because we're about to do the same thing again with RAD. But I'm going to tell you this, my vision is this: being aware of how we got here and understanding, in order for us to get to a different place, my mom used to say, it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have.
Thank you so much, Joycelyn. I want to say just a quick good night to the listeners of WBAI. I know they needed to cut away at 7:30, so thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Corinne from Upper West Side Open Hearts, and your host is Shams DeBaron, the homeless hero. We're going to go to the next question and give everybody a chance to answer that. So let's roll that tape.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Belcher. My question tonight is simple. If you become mayor, what does the future look like for unsheltered homeless who are living on the streets or in the subways and are now currently living in a hotel like myself? Also, what does the future look like for those who are still currently street and subway homeless? Thank you.
Wait. Did we ask this? Did the next question come?
Yeah, we're going to ask this one because we wanted to make sure we got to, we did already ask this question to another group, but we wanted to make sure that we asked this question to this group so we could talk about unsheltered homeless. So we want to particularly ask you about your plans for unsheltered homeless.
Okay, so we're still going to get to a next question, right?
And next question was the first 100 days, which is what we got to already. So that's why we're skipping around.
Okay. Cool.
So go ahead. Why don't we have Carlos jump in since Joycelyn just went?
Awesome. Thank you for this. So in the city council and the oversight that we've done, we've learned a few things. One, that when you interact with not just unsheltered New Yorkers, but the chronically returning to unsheltered New Yorkers are telling us a few things. One, that the shelters are not safe, that they've experienced a shelter experience that is not safe. So one, we gotta solve the safety issue. But the shelter problem is the problem. With $3 billion that we spend in the budget every year, and that continues just to grow more and more. And it's not all city; it's some state and federal money. We need to move to a housing first model, so that we really remove that negative experience and put people into a permanent housing. And I think we've already started talking about and pointing to things like converting non-union hotels and commercial spaces to permanent housing and bringing more houses online, more apartments online. And so I think that's number one. And then two, using the enforcement that we have right now with NYPD is just, it doesn't work. More case management to really understand what's going on and really bring someone into services, supportive services. And I think we just need more of that. And I'm open to any other ideas that may be coming out of this forum as well.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Over to Ray.
You know, I just want to get back to and answer this, something that Sham has said earlier, and that is the system, this challenges have existed long before George Floyd and COVID. They've been systemic, and I have written a forward that documents the impact that this has had on the U.S. economy of trillions of dollars. And so what do we need to do today? We need to make sure that we decriminalize homelessness. We need to provide tailored services. We need to have mental health services. We need to have job training so that people can transition into jobs. And if they don't have the skill set, we need to train them to make sure that they get into jobs. And we need to place them. And we need to have childcare. And we need to have them decrease the interaction with the criminal justice system. The services that we provide now, we need to continue to invest in those services. We need to treat these people with dignity. They are us, we are they. There's no difference. And so we need to acknowledge what the challenges are. We need to make sure that we have the right services that are invested in meeting the challenges. And we ought to do this with a sense of urgency that up to this point, if we've had it, it's not been reflected. So it's clear that it's not working. And this heavy dependence on what has not worked is not going to go forward. Going forward is not going to work either. So we know what works. We have the testimonies, and we need to invest in those testimonies, which is how I think about it.
So Ray, Ashley is in a hotel right now. She was moved there because of COVID. Previously, she was, sleeping on the street and in subways. Past COVID, what is offered to people who are sleeping on the street and in subways?
So one, I want to spend some time with Ashley. I want to get a sense of what her promises are, and I want to get Ashley a job. I want to make sure that
So we're going to replace homeless outreach just with you personally meeting each person.
No. When I say that's we, I mean, when I mean me, I mean, as a leader, yes, I want to be held accountable for this. I'm not going to outsource accountability, which unfortunately has happened. So yes, I will be accountable to Ashley to make sure that Ashley and those whom Ashley represent get a job, can transition back into a lifestyle that is a lifestyle of dignity. Yes, I want to be held accountable for that. I'm not going to outsource that.
What does she need first? What does she need first? Yeah, Shams, go ahead.
Well, the question Ashley is asking basically, because I'm in the shelter the same way she is, so I'm in the hotel. And so there's a fear for people that are especially just coming in, that when it's declared that it's okay for us to go, to leave the hotels, and you can see from the current administration, he's trying to move that fast. The only alternative for us is the congregate settings for single adults. So the real question is, if this was you, would you be returning Ashley, myself, to a congregate setting? So the essential question is, are we going to continue with a congregate model, or does Ashley have a better option in terms of the focus being permanent housing or a more holistic environment as opposed to the
my objective would be to give Ashley more permanent housing with holistic services that are available. That would be my objective. And as I said from the outset, I'm going to look at all available options, the affordable housing stock that currently exists, that's available to us that we're not accessing. And I want to take people like Ashley, make certain that I understand the things that she's interested in, make certain that Ashley has the right to work if she wants to and get her trained, and put her into a housing situation where she can have dignity. That's my objective.
Shams, can you comment a little bit on putting jobs, on the sequencing of jobs and services and other needs?
How do I think about it?
Shams has some experience here. I'd love to hear from.
Okay, so I'll say this, the current way that things have been done is like you come into the shelter system, some of us off the street, some of them dealing with mental illness or substance use disorder, and we're rushed into this job environment without those things that we kind of need in terms of self-development. Certain things are life skills oriented, or some things are just basically, just basic human things like how to budget, how to deal with the substance use disorder, mental illness. What I see in the shelter system is there's not a lot of assessment. There's just this setup of we're going to move you into jobs that's going to solve the problem, and then we stay stuck in the shelter for 3, 4, 5 years going through that whole process, and it makes no sense. And it's hard to develop in that type of environment. And of course, listen, we saying $3,500 a month. In reality, couple that with the medical toll that it puts on us. Dealing with those of us that are in the shelter system, we age more. So how would you turn that whole way around that just does not work, has not worked for many, many years, and just perpetuates the same thing?
So that's why I started with mental health, do an assessment. I talked about doing an assessment with Ashley, which is what's going to be needed.
I want to let Joycelyn jump in. So Joycelyn,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I think, the ultimate goal is to get people into permanent housing, but I'm not for the congregate setting because we shouldn't be paying for systems that are not safe and that people don't feel safe in those type of systems. They're not working. We should move away from them. But we have to meet people where they're at. And we have to understand that we don't live in a world where it's one size fits all. We have to, you have people that are homeless, that are on the street, that have mental issues, that have trust issues, right? Even if you try to help them, they won't allow you to give them help. So we have to build that trust, and we have to get to know people, meet them where they're at, and, deal with all of the issues that they have related to who they are, because it's not just the issue of homelessness. It's a lot of other things that are going on as well that we need to address. And we can't be so quick to want to say, this is what we envision, everything should be for you. We have to build that trust with people and give them, fit their needs for what they see they need for themselves.
So before we wrap up, because we're almost out of time, just want to do a couple quick polls. Are you committing to end congregate shelters in your administration? Can I get some hands up if you are? And how long is it going to take? So just really quick, Carlos, then Ray, then Joycelyn, how long is it going to take?
That's going to take a few years. I am open to hearing from anyone who can make it shorter than 4 years. But I think it's going to take a few years to get out of congregate. But making that commitment at the very beginning is going to be key.
Ray.
It's going to take a while, but I think we have to invest in the first 100 days. Matter of fact, in the first day.
Joycelyn?
I think if we're committed to it, we can get it done really quickly. Sometimes we know every reason why something can't happen. And I think that we're very resourceful. We're very intelligent. When we want to get something done, it gets done. So we should give that same type of effort to this situation and make sure that it gets done. We don't have 4 years to spend on this. We don't have time to study it and analyze it. We need to work towards getting it done.
Thank you so much to all. Yeah, Shams, go ahead.
I got one final question, and this is post-COVID recovery type of question. So if the rent moratorium is lifted, you're going to face a crisis like never before. Because right now you're looking at someone who systematically has been so messed up, in the system that, okay, it explains my homelessness. But there are people who've never experienced homelessness that might find their way into a shelter. What will you do?
Let's go Joycelyn, and then Ray, and then Carlos.
Okay.
Well, we definitely have to be proactive about ensuring that that doesn't happen. Every day we have residents of the city that are investing in the city, and we need to make sure that they see a return on investment. The government during this pandemic, unprecedented time, we asked people to stay home. People lost their jobs. So the government has to step up and do its part to ensure that we do not further increase the number of homeless people in this city. One of the ways we can do it is providing grants for landlords with the option that they would have to forgive the tenant's rent. But we have to be creative about ensuring that whatever dollars we do have, we utilize those dollars in a manner that is people's first, and we ensure that we do not create a huger or bigger homelessness situation through that and as well as RAD.
Okay, Ray.
So what I described from the outset was making certain that we provided and continue to provide rental subsidies, because we've not thought about what happens when the moratorium ends. I'd also make sure that we got legal assistance to delay, and I would also advocate for additional Section H vouchers from the federal government.
Thank you, Carlos.
We have to win the battle on canceling rent and keeping the moratorium alive, even if COVID, if we are lifted from the COVID experience that we're in right now. And with the supermajority in Albany in the Senate, I think we can do that. I think that there's a lot of ways that we can solve this issue of this link of need. The homeowner that needs to pay the mortgage, that there's a way that we figure out how we make them whole. That's government. Government has to step in this situation. And we have the funding, and I hope that the federal government comes in to support us. But at the city level, we can actually build out universal basic income programs to ensure that people have what they need. The rental assistance is one piece, but I think we need more than just securing housing. We need to make sure that people can pay for their children's school supplies, for medicine, for transportation on the subway. All of these things.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our candidates for joining us. We ran a little bit over. We appreciate you sticking with us. I'm just going to wrap things up. So thank you to these candidates for being here with us.
Thank you.
So I'm Corinne Lowe. Thank you. Yes. So I'm Corinne Lowe from the Upper West Side Open Hearts Initiative. That's a grassroots organization that's dedicated to supporting shelters in our neighborhood and beyond. And we are asking all candidates to complete a post survey so that we can get these answers on record. And so candidates, look out for that. We're going to look for you to be completing that. And then you guys can look for that on our website. You can also see on our website, UWSopenhearts.org, all of the videos submitted tonight. I know earlier in the night we had some problems getting the videos to play. So we had dozens of videos submitted by directly impacted people who are currently or recently homeless. And you can visit our website to see those. And if you're a candidate running for any office, that's going to help you see what's on people's mind. And you can also learn more about getting involved in your neighborhood. So I'm going to pass it over to Shams to close us out.
I'm so honored just to be in amongst all of you. And I'm just going to close it out real simple. For all of my directly impacted people and those that represent that directly impacted people, I want you to understand that today is a milestone in our history, because these candidates that came out, what they really did was they gave us a seat at the table. They did something that the current administration refused to do. They gave us a voice in the discussion, and hopefully we'll have a hand in the decision making. But you can be proud, because this is our moment, and they have dignified us with their presence and with their attention. And so I thank you, candidates, and we're here. This is not the end of our discourse. We're going to come back again, and I appreciate you and thank everybody. And let's just keep it going. We got to change the city. We will, and we're going to make this city recover. And we're going to really bridge the gap between that so-called tale of two cities. We're going to do that. Trust me. And the fact that you have, notable economists with just a homeless guy that's on the Upper West Side coming together to bring you this, that's just a sign that we can really bridge this gap. I thank you for everything. I appreciate you. Look at the Homeless Hero, Open Hearts Initiative. We here. Thank you.
So thanks, everybody. Follow Shams DeBaron, the Homeless Hero, on Twitter. You can look for him on Facebook. And I forgot to thank Vocal New York, Safety Net Project of the Urban Justice Center, Neighbors Together, Human.NYC, and the New York Housing Conference for empowering the directly impacted people to ask their questions tonight. So thank you so much, everyone.